Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the ESL Southeast European Championship. This is the third qualifier, and we're into the semi-final games. We've got a killer of a game here for you guys. It's going to be CheeseHead versus Superlubo. Both these players are really looking forward to this game. They've got a lot on the line here as well. So, Dib, what you feel is going to happen in this game, considering we do have the picks and bans, which I have seemed to have lost once again. I've already got this terrible habit of losing the picks and bans. Okay, I
So
found it. Super Lubo, Paladin, Druid, Warlock, Rogue has been banned, and Cheesehead has got Paladin, Druid, and Priest, with his Rogue also being banned.
yeah, so we've already seen Super Lubo's decks from previous round, relatively aggressive decks. Um, so I'd expect it to be, I'd expect it to be a quick series. Cheesehead, sorry, also has the Paladin, as did Super Lubo, and we saw that. That's essentially what the series came down to last time against Blanky, was that Paladin mirror. So that could be an important matchup. The Priest for Cheesehead could also be quite powerful. Interesting that Superlubo essentially chose to change his ban. In the last series, he banned Priest. Now he's banned Rogue. Maybe feeling that that's a little bit of a better ban for him. So that's an
Mhm.
interesting choice from him. For um, Superlubo, he's in a really good position when it comes to points for qualifying. The way the qualifying works for this is the player that there's four qualifiers, and the players that they accrue points based on how they do in each of the qualifiers. So you want to continuously do well in all of the qualifiers. And
Mhm.
Superlubo is already sitting at fourth position before counting any of the points from today. So he's in a really good position to go on and actually qualify as the top 4 points earners qualifier. But we're going to be able to jump into this game now as we have Super Lubo starting on his Druid and um, Cheesehead here on his Priest.
Yeah, I'm just trying to access Super Lubo's cards. This spectate, you click onto spectate, and then the
Yeah,
menu disappears. It
eh,
can be frustrating at the best of times.
yeah. Blizzard are not always the best in how they manage their updates when it comes to caster usage. I would definitely say that, but we've managed to get into this game here, and we do see Super Lubo on his aggro druid, which we didn't see in the last series as it was banned there. But it's not too surprising to see him bring it. So we spoke about this in an earlier series, um, where Prodigy, his compatriot, that's also on the same number of points as him coming into today, had a very similar lineup. In fact, the only difference there was that Prodigy had the Priest and Superlubo has the Paladin. So I'm not surprised to see him also have Aggro Druid. Maybe the players work together. No idea if they have actually, as there's actually quite a few Bulgarian players in this qualifiers that have been doing quite well. But the aggro druid is really looking quite good at the moment, and what's interesting here is that Cheesehead is not actually playing the Razakis Priest. This looks like
Mhm.
a Dragon Priest from Cheesehead, obviously the Draconid Operative being a giveaway, as well as the Divine Spirit Inner Fire, which tends to do pretty well against Druid, but not quite as strong against aggro Druid as other Druid decks, where casting Divine Spirit and Inner Fire on a minion can really make it very difficult to near impossible for the druid to actually kill that minion.
Yeah. Considering Super Lubo's start here, right? Do you feel that there might be any justification to actually attacking with patches and then actually using your Galactic Crawler on your own patches?
Uh, I'm not sure with the cards like Savage Roar and that in hand. There is definitely value to be gained from having a wider board. And in this case, it's not like you're opening yourself up to a Potion of Madness or anything like that. So I kind of like keeping the extra minions on board. And here, especially with having these 3 1-drops he can play, this is really powerful, especially with Savage Roar to possibly follow up next turn. And Cheesehead here, one of the weaknesses of Dragon Priest, I've actually been playing this deck a bit on ladder myself, and one of the weaknesses can be that it's not as consistent in its curve as it once was when you had your Wormrest agents and the the one mana 2/3 hatchling. Forgot their name now. But yeah, when you had that early curve, now the deck is a lot more value based, and then you kind of hope to kind of outvalue your opponent with the extra value you get from cards like Draconid Operative, as well as Curious Glimmerroot.
Just quickly, if my math serves me correct, does Superlubo not have lethal next turn?
With the Savage Roar, he
The
gets
seven.
8.
Oh, it's two.
Oh, yeah, I
So
mean, sorry, he gets
a plus two attack. So that's going to be
12.
12 plus
Plus
the
what's on
damage.
board, which
Yeah,
is 8.
five,
So
8.
it's
So it's
20
20.
damage,
Okay,
which is
it's
not
just
quite
short.
lethal, but I think you probably just take it if you're in Super Lubo's position. And here, Cheesehead has an interesting turn. I think he might go heavy in on this Radiant Elemental. He might even choose to coin this Divine Spirit on the Radiant Elemental, but it looks like he's going to hold it back. Now, he could get well, honestly, he would have got punished by this either way, but the Crazed Alchemist could have been a bit of a punish there if he'd gone with the Crazed Alchemist to flip this Radiant Elemental and then just trade it in uh, one of the minions here. But he does still have this Bloodsail Corsair, which thanks to the buffs, he can actually just use to kill off this Radiant Elemental. But instead, he's going to trade off the patches and use his hero to attack in. And now Cheesehead is still facing down quite a lot of damage here. But the Shadow Word Pain and the heal is not a bad turn for him. He can essentially, or he's removing 3 attack from the board possibly, and healing up for 2. So unless Superlubo has something like another Savage Roar, it's going to be unlikely that he's going to be able to find lethal next turn at least.
Yeah. So the Shadow Word Pain on the cultist or Corsair, whatever its name is, Bloodsail Corsair, as well as the heal, at least keeps him out of range for now. However, if there is another Savage Roar, they will be lethal here for him. The Direwolf Alpha also just does so much. And also with that Crazed Alchemist, he can actually still do quite a bit of damage here.
Yeah.
Um,
And he can do the neat trick as well with the Direwolf Alpha and the Crazed Alchemist. So he can play this next to one of the minions, and then he can swap that minion, probably wanting to swap on the Flame Elemental here, and that'll essentially give it an extra attack here because it'll basically become like a base 2/2, and then it still gets the Direwolf Alpha buff of the +1 attack. So if he's not going to go with that, then that looks like he's just going to play the Galaka Crawler instead. He essentially missed 1 damage here, and I'm not sure I like committing to the board this heavily, especially as you're going into your opponent's turn where they have the coin and possibly a Dragonfire Potion, which is a lot more likely, obviously, for this Dragon Priest to have because of the fact that it is running 2 copies of all the cards. So now the turns for Super Lubo are a lot more awkward as he doesn't have that um, living mana to follow up with.
Yeah. So no living mana here. And Super Lubo is really going to struggle to try and find this additional 5 damage to do here. As we're going to see the Crazed Alchemist onto that Corsair. He's going to use his shapeshift to at least put Cheesehead down onto 4. But the thing is that Cheesehead can just, this turn coming up, he can just go Tar Creeper into heal. And I mean, if he really wants to, you can also increase the health there with the Power Word Shield.
Yeah,
So it's going to be even more difficult for Super Lubo to burn through this.
Powered Shield is really good here if he was able to find something like the um, Potion of Madness as well, as it would have been a way to actually clear off both these minions. But even with this, he's still going to get a pretty decent minion on board. And you can see Super Lubo trading in here, first of all because he wants to get the extra minions, but also because it's actually important to knock down the health of this Tar Creeper to play around your Divine Spirit in a fire. As that is a very common inclusion in these Dragon Priest decks. And here, Cheesehead's going to be able to buff up this Tar Creeper a lot in terms of its health with the Cabal Talon Priest to heal, and now if he wants the Divine Spirit as well, which would take it up to a 14 health Tar Creeper, which basically means that Super Lubo will have to trade his whole board into this Tar Creeper.
Yeah, and that's just going to be so rough. I mean, he does get the mana back, but that Savage Roar.
That could tempt him to just trade in 1 here, or not trade in any and hope that Cheesehead kills one of his. But I think that if you just don't trade at all here, Cheesehead probably could make the read that Super Lubo has something like this Savage Roar, and then he would just opt not to kill any of them, and then Super Lubo's in a similar position again, where he basically just has to pass, whilst Cheesehead is just developing. But Super Lubo here, he could just trade 1 into the Tar Creeper and then pass. Obviously, Inner Fire is going to be strong to deal the damage, but Superlubo needs to make sure that he can connect the Savage Roar, and I really like this. Just trading the singular one. A little bit unfortunate. The Dragonfire potion is actually really good here. Cheesehead basically has to decide here whether the Inner Fire is more important to him or the Dragonfire potion, or he can opt to go for both, which is aggressive whilst clearing the board at the same time. He is gonna obviously deal a lot of damage to his Tar Creeper, but it's probably good enough if he's clearing up all these living mana treants.
Yeah, and that's just going to seal the game here for Cheesehead. Super Luba picking up the Flappy Bird, the Vicious Fledgling, and that's not going to be able to do anything this turn. I mean, he can just play it out, really, but he's going to be facing down the 12 attack there, and that's just going to be it. As
Yep.
Cheesehead picks up a really nice win there, being able to reverse it around, considering that he was under a lot of pressure and put down to incredibly low health so early in the game.
Yeah, and we saw just how important Divine Spirit was in that game, honestly. That's really what allowed him to deal with that living mana value that otherwise looked like it was going to be enough for Super Lubo. Cheesehead was able to just put that Tar Creeper in the way that essentially was like a pseudo board clear there because Super Lubo had to basically trade his whole board in. And unfortunately, when you draw something like Savage Roar, it tempts you into
Mm.
not making that trade, and then the Inner Fire becomes more useful, and the Dragonfire potion got more value. So Super Lubo wasn't too far off there in a matchup that usually the aggro druid is favored in. But Cheesehead was able to pull it out in the end here, and he moves 1-0 up in the series, now switching to his Murloc Paladin up against Super Lubo, who is sticking with his aggro token druid. And an interesting thing about this matchup is that it
Hmm.
used to be quite heavily favored for the token druids because Hungry Crab used to be very common when Murloc Paladin was also more common on the ladder and in the tournament meta. But these days, the decks don't tend to run Hungry Crab anymore, so the matchup is actually pretty good for the Murloc Paladins, even being a little bit favored for them.
Yeah, and considering that Cheesehead has got to start like this as well, he's got the Tidecaller turn one, um, going into the Grimescale Chum. Do, do you play the Grimescale Chum first year and just hope that you win the 50-50?
Yeah, I
It's
think
difficult.
I think a lot of the time you'd rather just have the minion down here that doesn't die to the patches play. But unfortunately, Super Lubo here has Mark of the Lotus and patches, which is actually just an extremely powerful play here. Because it's really allowing him to take an early dominant lead on this board, and this matchup really just is largely about board. We've been seeing a lot of these kind of matchups today, and they do tend to be about who can get ahead and push their advantage on the board. And in this case, Cheesehead is quite far behind thanks to the value that this Patches and Mark of the Lotus has given Super Luba.
Yeah. Super Luba does have the Druid of the Swarm here, so if you wanted to actually get a taunt down so you could continue pushing the damage face, he could. Or he could just use his hero power to clear up. Now, if you're in Super Luba's position, I feel that developing onto the board is a little bit better than that. And he's also going to take the trade, which is interesting.
Yeah, I like taking the trade. You just play around any kind of buffs from your opponents. You know, the Paladin's obviously well known for their ability to buff minions, so you kind of do want to play around that. Even though there's not many buffs that are likely to be played on 3, other than something like a War Leader there to buff up the minion, uh, it kind of helps you clear the board for future turns as well. That's really what these matchups are about, once again, is fighting for the board. So not too surprising to see him go for that. And I think Super Lubo here could even be considering the Savage Roar. What he can do is he can test for the Noble Sacrifice first with Savage Roar by using his hero power to attack, or using his hero, sorry, to attack Cheesehead after he gets that buff from the Savage Roar. And then if he finds out it is Noble Sac, well then he can just kill the Murloc here uh, with the Taunted Scarab. Otherwise, um, he still has some options in order to kill the Murloc once it comes back from redemption, or if it's Getaway Kodo, then he's probably fine with that, as it doesn't really affect the board. So I think I really like the Savage Roar here from Superlubo, and it looks like he agrees. And also going to go face with the hero first here, exactly as we said, to check for that noble sack. And then I imagine he will continue taking the trades and push face for 8.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Paladin ready from turn 4 is where they often start buffing up their minions. And we do see the Blessing of Kings in Cheese's head. In Cheese's head's hand, I don't know why I went
CheeseHead's
completely.
hand, yeah.
Cheesehead hand. Okay. We'll get there eventually. So making those trades is really important because you don't want to get blown up by the fact that Paladin can buff minions up to astronomical levels. As Cheesehead is just going to develop this Murloc War Leader.
Yeah, and the War Leader here, not too bad, but because it kind of at least looks like it's contesting 2 minions on the surface, or alternatively at least forces your opponent to hero power. Superlubo doesn't really have the best of turns here. Crypt Lord is nice going into Living Mana, of course, because of the obvious synergy there. But he probably wants to go with the Cobalt Scalebane before the Living Mana anyway. But it looks like he might still opt to go with the Crypt Lord here, and is actually just going to go with the double trade. Once again, aggressively playing around any buffs that Cheesehead could have. And I like at least how consistent he's being, but it's going to be difficult to impossible to actually kill off this Finger with anything he has. And I think Cheesehead may be trying to uh, bluff that he has something like uh, Eldor Peacekeeper by targeting the patches there to try and maybe discourage Superlubo from Crazed Alking as minion, Crypt Lord or something. I'm not entirely sure what the thing he's trying to fake was there, but that could be at least one of the cards. I mean, the other obvious one would be like Hammer of Wrath, but yeah, the Finger there looks pretty good, and now
Yeah.
Cobalt Scalebane looks pretty good as well.
Yeah, Cobalt Scalebane would be so nice here. Again, it's also on curve. And if you can get the buff onto the Crypt Lord, things are going to be looking pretty nice for you as well because the Crypt Lord on its base attack is not that great. However, its health does grow for every minion that you play.
Yeah,
So
which could encourage Superlubo to actually just play more minions here rather than just the Cobalt Scalebane. If he plays the Cobalt Scalebane, it goes up to 7, which would survive a Blessing of Kings buff on the Finger. But he could also opt to try and buff it up even more in case there's something else that's coming down that could buff it up. But I think yeah, he's doing the calculations, saying what can possibly buff Finja up enough that it's able to kill this Crypt Lord. Because if it's not killing the Crypt Lord, it's not getting the value, and then it's not so much of a threat. But here, Cheesehead does have the Blessing of Kings. He might honestly just go for the Blessing of Kings and still bump the Crypt Lord because he needs to, basically, in order to guarantee the kill next turn, or at least he wants to use the Blessing of Kings here. If he opts not to attack with the Finger, that could weaken his chances, or that could increase his chances of dying to something like Crazed Alchemist, as the Crypt Lord will obviously have full health still.
mhm.
But that's kind of the only real consideration for attacking, other than just being able to attack twice in case, let's say, Superlubo went for something else that basically forced Crypt Lord to get high enough in HP that Finja isn't even able to get through it next turn with another Blessing of Kings and a Murloc War Leader. But to be honest here, it looks like Superlubo has a commanding enough position on the board that it's going to be very difficult for Cheesehead to find his way back into this game, especially with only 15 health.
Yeah, 15 health against an aggro druid like this, it's going to be really tough. But going to use Blessing of Kings and not actually bump there at all. And there we do see that that Crazed Alchemist that you were speaking about. And if I'm not mistaken, would that not be lethal? Yeah.
Yep, I'm pretty sure this is lethal. You can also, yeah, you can buff up your Crypt Lord's HP, essentially buffing up its attack like this, and that's going to give you more than enough here for lethal, as he just has 15 with the Crypt Lord and the Cobalt Scalebane here. So Superlubo is going to be able to tie up this series now, getting the win with his aggro druid, a deck that as we spoke about in previous series, the deck I really like right now for Conquest. I think it's pretty powerful, and it does well against some of the decks that we've been seeing do quite well in this in the previous qualifiers, like Chazul, who brought the two big decks, Big Priest and Big Druid, and it does quite well against those. And we saw as well earlier for Prodigy, his aggro druid also did quite well against Exigo's big druid. So it is definitely seeming like a good choice right now, and even they're managing to get a win in what is a slightly unfavorable matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a look at Superlubo there, he had such a fantastic start as well. I mean, your turn one was the Blood Cell Corsair, or Cultist, the Blood Cell Cultist, bringing out the patches and then coining out the Mark of the Lotus. Just that alone allowed him to run away with the game so early as well.
Yeah, it was a really good win for him. And for these players, it's pretty important. Once again, Super Lupo is doing quite well already in points. He's already on 78 points, which puts him tied for third with his compatriot, Prodigy, who, if I'm not mistaken, is still in the tournament. He was playing his top 16 match just now. I'm not entirely sure if it's finished yet. It looks like, yeah, he is still in the tournament. He actually won, so he's also in the top four. So for both of the Bulgarian players, they're doing really well. CheeseHead, on the other hand, he doesn't have any points yet, I don't think. So he really needs to get a win. Getting a win would actually put him right up there to stay in contention for the top four. But almost anything short of a win today is going to make it difficult for him to actually make it. And here we have Cheesehead on his Druid, which looks to be a Jade Druid, versus Superlubo on his Murloc Paladin. Cheesehead does actually have 8 points, so not a lot. Still, basically the number of points that he's going to need he's going to need to get a win and a decent finish tomorrow to break that top four.
Yeah, 2 wins should possibly do it for him though as well.
2 wins will definitely do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is also a very tall ask to ask for somebody. To win 2 tournaments in a row, back to back is sometimes not the easiest thing. But Super Lubo here on his Burlock Paladin.
Yeah, this is a matchup that was really really strong for Murloc Paladin. Probably one of the only matchups that was that Jade Druid was weak in before the round of nerfs that saw both decks nerfed. But since then, both decks have changed quite a lot, especially the Jade Druid. And the matchup these days is still quite favored though for the Murloc Paladin. Probably the worst matchup for Jade Druid. So definitely a matchup here that Super Lubo is going to be happy to be playing. But there are some big blowout possibilities for the Druid. Those are cards like Mind Control Tech, as well as Spreading Plague, or possibly even Primordial Drake if the players do include that, which is not all that common these days.
Yeah. The Redemption, though, being chosen as the secret, I really like choosing that because you're going to your opponent's turn 4. You're trying to set up a really great Gentle Megasaur. So even if there was a swipe, your minion would still be able to come back and he would be in a very good position. As the Gentle Megasaur is coming down here. Ooh. I suppose you probably just take the Living Spores? Or maybe the Liquid Membrane?
Yeah, especially with Sunkeeper Tarium in hand and Cobalt Scalebane, Living Spores does seem really tempting. There's a lot of ways. Or basically, I think Living Spores almost just wins you the game here because there's no real way that Cheesehead is going to be able to clear this board and then clear the Living Spores again. I imagine we're probably going to see Cheesehead go for the Mind Control tech here. He needs to find some way to claw back on board, and this is probably the only way. With that, he can always go with the coin Jade Blossom, essentially turning the coin into a permanent mana crystal here, if he gets a big enough minion. Or he could also have gone with the Mark of the Lotus if he wanted to just make his minions a little bit stronger on contesting the board. But I like the coin Jade Blossom here. It gets him to that Spreading Plague, or the Malfurion next turn, or even just Spreading Plague and Mark of the Lotus.
10. It's 11, 12, 13. Unfortunately, Super Lubo going to be one off lethal, picking up that Rockpool Hunter.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, it is one off lethal. With the Rockpool Hunter, he'd be able to buff up the Tide Caller enough that it would be exactly one off lethal.
Yeah. So unfortunately, not going to go for that. But oh man, that Cobalt Scalebane, just also buffing up that Murloc Tidecaller.
Not quite the
Uh,
target he wanted though.
yeah,
I think he would have definitely wanted that on um, the 1-2 instead, just to kind of spread the wealth. But this spreading plague, speaking of spreading, is going to be really good here. With the Mark of the Lotus as well, he can go with spreading plague now. I don't like the way. I suppose he's just going to trade um, the Murloc here into the Scalebane because he needs to kill the Scalebane, I imagine. Or he could trade it into the Gentle Megasaur. But either way, this board of 2/6 taunts is pretty strong and pretty scary here. Superlubo does, of course, have that Sunky Batarium. This is what all these little um, tokens of his have been kind of building up to. But it's not going to be enough to get through all the taunts here and actually find lethal, as there is basically an even matchup of 5 taunts here and 5 minions. So he's going to take the value trade first. I like this. Gives him a little bit of a better board here after the Sunky Batarium. So I really like that choice from Superlubo here.
yeah. Unfortunately, no Murlocs in his on his board anymore, so that the that those Rockpool Hunters could find some value. However, this is still applying a lot of pressure here onto CheeseHead because effectively he's going to have to take 3 damage to face if he uses his hero power to
Yeah.
deal with that Sun Kipatarim. But I think Malfuria will just be coming down.
Yeah, and I think he kind of has to go for Malfurion here because he needs the armor gain right now, and the taunts also kind of help to hope, or he hopes help him survive. That's really what this is right now for Cheesehead. It's just a game of trying to survive and then hoping that he can actually find a way to claw back into this game. You know, in the late game, you would usually favor the Jade Druid in this matchup, especially when they're able to get Malfurion like this. That can help them gain back all the health that they've lost, or aggressively deal with the Paladin's board. So if Cheesehead is able to stabilize here, it could be looking quite good for him. But now he needs to decide whether he wants to preemptively trade off these 3/3s into this Sunky Bataram, and it looks like he is going to trade all 3 of them, in fact, which is quite a aggressive choice.
Yeah, very aggressive there by Cheesehead as Superlubo finds a Finja. It's not a bad card to find. And the Rockball Hunter is also just going to start buffing up. And I'm probably going to see him bump as well. I really
Yeah,
would like to see the bump.
I think bumping here is fine. You're probably not afraid of the Primordial Drake because of how uncommon it is in Jade Druid these days. The only concern would be something like double swipe would be really good here. But the Fandral is pretty good here, especially with the Wrath and now the hero power as well. He goes for the Nourish as well. This gives him basically just the card draw as an added benefit. The ramp is essentially irrelevant. But yeah, he's gonna go with the hero power. I really would have preferred to just see him go with Wrath and the hero power there rather than the Nourish. I don't think the Nourish was necessary. Um, and it's kind of left him in a position now where uh, Super Lubo has enough damage. He has lethal now with that buff on the Finja. He can trade in one of the 3/2s here, and then he can push for exactly 10 damage.
Yeah,
So yeah, Super Lubo, he should be able to take this game now as long as he spots that lethal. And he is able to. And now he's going to move up. Cheesehead there getting punished a little bit for his greed. I think, you know, if he'd just gone with the Wrath
hmm
and the hero power, he would have actually survived there. So yeah, getting quite punished there for his greed. And I think maybe Cheesehead would need to, you know, look at that and see if that really was the optimal line of play. I'm not sold on it. But Super Lubo is happy nonetheless, as yeah, he moves up 2-1 now in this series and is only 1 game away from making it to that grand final. And most importantly for him, getting a lot of points.
Yeah, those points are really key here. 2-1 up. You've got 2 attempts with your final deck, and it's not impossible. We've seen Superlubo over the course of today, and if I'm not mistaken, we saw him as well during one or two of the other qualifiers.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
came second, I think, in no, no, yeah, he came second in the second qualifier, so last week
Yeah.
Sunday. So that's why he managed to get the 75 points, and then he got 3 points from coming in the top 64, the um, one of the game weeks before that. No, no, sorry, for coming in the top 128. So the first qualifier he was knocked out in the first round, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The second qualifier he made it to second place, and now he should be getting enough points to make that top four. We've already seen Chazul and Steve French drop out of this tournament, so they were the 2 players above him. So he and Prodigy are definitely going to move above them after
Mm-hmm.
today's uh, qualifier points are tallied up, I believe. But Prodigy is also still in the running. He's in competing in the other semi-final right now. So you know, quite a lot of Bulgarian players again. We once again, I think that this happened in the second qualifier as well, where we had 3 Bulgarians and one Hungarian left in the top four, and that's happened again today. This time though, it's CheeseHead as the single remaining Hungarian, and Superlubo, Prodigy, and Felzak are the Bulgarian players. So I mean, the Bulgarian players have had a really strong showing over this qualifier, especially after the first qualifier where it was only really Prodigy that actually had much of or that managed to make it to the top four um, in that qualifier.
Yeah. For a moment, I thought I had a bit of a bug with my spectator client, so I actually jumped off the players. And as I jump off, I see that they started to do battle with each other. So we'll be able to tell you, or I'll be able to say exactly what happens as soon as I'm able to get back in game. But Dib is far more than capable. So, and he's not
Yeah.
just a pretty face when it comes to Hearthstone.
Yeah, and we have Cheesehead here on his Druid. Uh, Once again, sticking with the Druid, and Superlubo going for his Warlock, which looks to be a Zulok. So, once again, another matchup that's traditionally going back even further than the sort of Murloc Paladin Jade Druid matchup. Generally, just Druids against Zoo have never fared that well because they've really struggled to deal with the white boards. Some cards like Spreading Plague and Primordial Drake when they are in Druid decks can help make a difference. They can definitely have a big impact on the matchup. So we have seen Cheesehead does of course have the Spreading Plague, but I don't imagine he has any Primordial Drakes. But he does have a pretty good opening here with the double Wild Growth. And fortunately for him, Super Lubo has a really weak opening here. No 1 drops, no 2 drops. That's exactly what you want to see as the Druid here.
Yeah, Cheesehead is going to be incredibly happy with this, and we say he's got no 2 drops, but Super Lubo has just picked up probably the best 2 drop in his deck. Well,
Well,
the only
probably
two
the
drop
only
deck.
2 drop in his deck. Um,
2 drop in his deck with that Prince Kelliseth.
Yeah, the really curious thing is that Super Lubo chose to mulligan away Firefly on the mulligan, and that's really surprising. Maybe he was hoping to mulligan aggressively for this Kelliseth, and he didn't quite find it on the mulligan, but close enough. So, that might have been his plan. But Cheesehead, in the meantime, has been able to ramp up to Aya already. And even if your minions are buffed, if your opponent has more mana, they're probably going to be able to play just as good a minions. And now, Super Lubo a little bit unfortunate in the sense that he drew that patches, and otherwise this could have been a really good turn with just the South Sea Captain and the Soulfire. It would have been a really effective turn to fight for the board, but instead it looks like he's going to go with the coin and the Despicable Dreadlord here, and then leverage the Kelliseth to essentially trade up into this Maya Keeper with the help of that Despicable Dreadlord's end of turn effect.
Yeah, we're going to see CheeseHead also just bump here. They do the trade, and he's going to even ramp up to
Yep.
10 mana for the next turn. And the reason he's doing that is because he's got probably the best 10 mana card in the game, Ultimate Infestation in hand. That's going to give him so much value.
Yeah, and he is ridiculously far ahead in mana right now. 2 wild growths, a Maya Keeper, and a Nourish mean that he is going to be reaching 10 mana after Superlubo has only had 5 mana available to him. So this is really testing how well Zoo can do against Jade Druid, as this is by far worst case scenario for the Zoo here. He didn't have a fast enough start, I don't think. Even though he did get that killer set eventually, it still wasn't exactly what you would hope for. With no one drops. And now those are not the cards he wanted to discard. Those are the kind of cards that give him immediate effect on the board. And I think he was really hoping to be able to play one of those in the following turns. I think it's almost better to discard Blood Reaver Gul'dan there than the Soulfire and the Patches, simply because they are such powerful cards. In terms of pushing any kind of tempo advantage, whereas the Blood River Gul'dan is really more of a value engine that might not actually be that relevant here, as CheeseHead is so far ahead on mana.
Yeah, so far ahead. Superlubo could also play this Saturnight Chain Gang, possibly with the Flame Imp. It's pretty off curve, which is not the greatest thing. But if you're going to be playing the taunts, I feel that you can actually just skip over this Ghoul and just continue to push face.
Yeah, if he does do that though, CheeseHead can play Coon for the mana and then Ultimate Infestation again, and to kill off this Doomguard, which will just be an absolutely crazy turn again. Even though he'd overdraw, it's probably more than worth it in this scenario. So that could definitely be something he does here. The Glacial Shard Freeze is quite nice here. An interesting choice, or interesting inclusion here from Superlubo. Not something we've seen in a lot of the Zoo decks, but definitely a powerful card in Zoo. And now it looks like CheeseHead is going to go for that Coon, refresh his mana crystals, and then probably play the Ultimate Infestation here. Although he can just go with the double swipe as well, which looks pretty good. Double swipe actually completely clears this board, and I think that might be what he's going to play instead. But it looks like he instead just wants to go with a single swipe in the Jade Behemoth, just develop a little bit more of his own board. But it is a little bit at the expense that he does give his opponent some trades here.
Yeah, there's going to be some trades available here for Superlubo. And he does find the one Saturnight Chain Gang. And he could also combo that with the Flame Imp just to get a little bit more wide on board. But in terms of trades, CheeseHead has just got such a giant board here at the moment. There's actually very little that Superlubo can do to actually come back into this game. And it really comes down to CheeseHead being able to ramp up so fast to allow him to actually play this Ultimate Infestation so early.
Yeah, I mean, ramp, Ultimate Infestation. That's pretty much the dream scenario for the Druids, especially when the curve from the Warlocks is a little bit awkward. I mean, he hit the Keller set on 2, but you're like Tar Creepers on 3 are not really the kind of aggressive plays you want to be making. So it didn't
I don't even think you can classify Tar Creeper as aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. Like, he got some minions on board, but the Keleseth is more of a value engine. And to be honest, I think you'd rather have a bunch of 1-drops in hand than Prince Keleseth a lot of the time, because you want to just get ahead and push your advantage in this matchup more than you just want to get the extra value. And here, he has the Mind Control tech, which is pretty good here to steal one of these minions. And then he also has Swipe as follow-up to actually clear off one of the ones that survives. So I'd imagine he goes with the Mind Control tech. Saturnight Chain Gang, obviously a very good one for him to steal. But honestly, any of the minions are pretty good here, as the Mind Control tech is essentially removing them, if you think about it, by stealing them. And that's definitely something that is good for CheeseHead. And yeah, the Saturnight Chain Gang, pretty good. That just also makes the trades easier here. For CheeseHead. He doesn't even have to use the swipe if he doesn't want, but using the swipe is going to allow him to push quite a bit of damage to face. In fact, if he pushes everything to face here, it's not quite lethal. Oh no, it is. It's lethal with the hero power actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just managing to get it with that hero power, and CheeseHead is gonna get the win here and manage to even up the score again at 2 games apiece now.
Yeah, CheeseHead looked so good in that game. The fact that the main thing that a Druid tries to do, whether it's Jade Druid or Big Druid, is that you're really just trying to ramp up. You're really trying to cheat your curve so that you're able to play bigger minions that your opponent cannot deal with. And if you're able to do that as a druid, more often than not, you actually turn out to win the game there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a matchup that's not good for Druid, but the really scary thing about Druid is when it does get on that heavy ramp plan, when everything comes together like that, that's really why it traditionally used to have no real bad matchups, but now even in the bad matchups, it does still have decent ways to come back, and that's why Zoo is only slightly unfavorable now versus being a really bad matchup. And now we're going to go into this deciding game, which is going to be the Murloc Paladin for CheeseHead up against the Zoo once again for Superlubo, and this is a good start for him now. He has the Prince Keleseth, and he's on the coin as well, so he can actually coin out the Keleseth into double 1-drop follow-up, which is really powerful. Or he can just go with the double 1-drop first instead, and then follow up with the Keleseth. And CheeseHead absolutely slams this Valfin Inquisitor, so much so that it's managed to bug my spectator and appear really large here. But
Yeah,
it'll
same
die
here.
soon, and hopefully then that'll fix it.
Yeah, it should definitely do so. I really want to see Superlubo coin out this Prince Keleseth. I think it will be a one way that pretty much any minion you start drawing now will just always be stronger than your opponents. And it's one way that he'll be able to run away with this game.
Yeah, Superlubo has quite a lot of options here. So against this 1-3, you would want the uh, Flame Imp down, and it looks like he is going to go for that. The obvious concern is Rockpool Hunter, and so to play around that, I think he's going to go with the Void Walker here as well. And so this basically means that the Rockpool Hunter isn't quite as big a blowout here as it could be against just the Flame Imp by itself. And this also means that he can follow up with the Killer Set still into the Captain, and that gives him pretty good curve. I think getting these two minions on board is probably better than just having the extra 1/1 buff that playing the Prince Keleseth early gives you. I think very often it's an easy mistake to make to play the Prince Keleseth too early, or to think that sometimes it's better to coin it out here rather than just play more for the board, especially with the fact that that's really what this matchup is about.
Yeah, so I think that obviously if there was no Valfin Inquisitor, which Cheesehead really needed there,
Yeah.
we would have definitely seen that Prince Keleseth as the Valfin Inquisitor finally decides that now is his time just to return back to how he used to be, and just the small little Inquisitor next to that Rockpool Hunter.
Yeah.
However, its stats are not that bad considering it's still at the 1 mana, now sitting on 2/4 though.
Yeah, and this is an interesting turn. Subaru could go for the despicable, sorry, the imp and the soulfire here, but I think he's just gonna go with the Prince Keleseth and take the trade on either one of these Murlocs. It looks like he's gonna go for the trade on the higher health one here, just to try and play around some of the other possible effects like Murloc War Leader coming down this turn.
Yeah. So, I mean, if War Leader does come down here, it is still going to allow a trade onto that Rockpool Hunter. But this will also mean for Superlubo is, I mean, now that his minions are buffed, I mean, he still runs quite a few 1-drops in his deck. So he can also start tapping from this point onwards, especially if he doesn't find a way to actually
Most
fill up his
importantly,
curve.
this is going to bring out a 3/3 patches, and that allows him to just trade off this board and leave himself with a 3/3 against nothing. And as we know, this matchup, it's about board, and things are going well here for Superluba. He's ahead on the board, and he has that extra value of the um, Keleseth buff on his minions. And here, Cheesehead has a pretty awkward position with the extra 5-drop that he has here in this Menagerie Magician. It can be powerful. We've seen, obviously, with the Cobalt Scalebanes, the deck also has dragons in. So, we're looking at the beasts in the form of your like Galaka crawlers, and then obviously there's the large Murloc package. And Menagerie Magician is basically just a bigger version of the Zoobot that we saw popular for some of the other players so far.
Yeah, so just going to be using his hero power is Cheesehead, as this is going to allow some freedom for Superluba to develop on board here with this Malkathar Zimp as well as the Firefly. And this is going to allow him to, even if his opponent plays like the Cobalt Scalebane or something, yeah, I mean, that Doom God, he probably will throw down fairly, whimsically, because the Malkazar Zemp will at least draw him some cards to kind of refill his hand.
Yeah, you don't really want to discard Bone Mare, but if you are able to at least get the cards back, you're probably not that concerned about it, especially when, uh, playing the Doomguard here gives you such a good trade. And best case scenario, you discard the Flame Imp here, and that is basically drawing a card that's almost always going to be better than the Flame Imp there, because, all your minions are already buffed up by Prince Keleseth, and the Flame Imp is merely just a 1/2. So even though he did discard the Bone Mare there, I think he's still pretty happy. And now it's really difficult for Cheesehead to get back into this game.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult for him to get back in this game, especially that Superlubo has been able to pick up another Doom God. So if he really wanted to, he could go for the second Doom God that he has here to actually help him deal with this entire, with the board here. He's going to be playing it.
And if he doesn't discard the Soulfire, unfortunately he does. Maybe he could draw a second Soulfire here. Nope, no Soulfire. If he hadn't discarded the Soulfire, he would have had quite a lot of damage on board. 21, I believe, which isn't quite enough for lethal, but it also would have allowed him to trade up some of these smaller minions. But here he can just take the value trade with the new Doom Guard that he played and push the rest to face. The only concern for him needs to be playing around something like Primordial Drake or like Curator into Primordial Drake specifically in this case, because obviously Cheesehead only has 7 mana next turn, or just any kind of possible board clear. And Superlubo just gonna play it safe here and keep the 2 Doom Guards alive.
Yeah, I mean, he does push 12 damage that way, putting his opponent now onto 12. So
this is weaker against something like Sankey Batarim though, so I'm not entirely sure I like it, but Cheesehead doesn't really have any way to deal with this board, and it looks like Superlubo is going to win here and take it as a 3-2 victory, moving on to the final. And that's really important for him because he's going to be moving ahead as the points leader here. Largely, it's going to depend who will be in first after this week's game. Is going to depend on his final result up against his compatriot Prodigy, who also made it through to the final now. We can see, and both the players on the same points, both from Bulgaria. That's going to be a really exciting final to see, and I imagine whoever wins that should be almost guaranteed a top 4 spot for qualification. But I imagine they'll still want to come back tomorrow to see how far they can get to guarantee their spot. But it's been a really good showing from both of them and the Bulgarian players. And Cheesehead, he also got a decent result today. Maybe if he comes back tomorrow and wins, he could have a chance of making it through. He does still have the 3rd, 4th playoff, which will matter because there is basically 20 extra points on the line there. 3rd gets 60 and 4th gets 40. So if he can maybe come 3rd and then come back tomorrow and win, 160 points total plus the 8 that he had already. So that could get him into the top 4. But at the moment, the leaders in the top 4 are definitely going to be Prodigy and Superlubo, who are going to be coming up in the final next. So, any last thoughts on this game before we go to a short break?
No, I'm just really looking forward to the final that we have here. I mean, Superlubo has been playing so well. These points are also really crucial for him. Prodigy, also a really strong player that we saw both in the first qualifier as well as now. So 2 really strong players going into this final, both looking after or wanting to grab hold of those 100 points that are available to them so they can assist them with qualifying. So ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We're going to be back in about 5 minutes time or so for the final of this 3rd qualifier, which is going to be between Superlubo and Prodigy. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly.